So Bridgerton is back for another season, and guys, we are so not back. So if you have not been aware, Bridgerton is quite a huge TV series on Netflix that focuses on this Bridgerton family that find themselves living in Regency-era England. It is based on a book series by Julia Quinn, and each season focuses on the romances of the children of the Bridgerton family, who all happen to be named in alphabetical order. And we already got the A, the C, and the D, and now it is time for the B. This time it is the second son's Benedict story. We got only half of the season so far, but I think I already saw enough to say that I do not like where things are going. Sure, you may say it's only half and they may surprise us, but also I feel like the writing is all over the walls on this one, and it has been for quite a while now. I feel like I could have made this video a long time ago, and honestly I wasn't planning to. Bridgerton was always a show that I just watched without any real intention of talking about ever, but since season 4 now seemingly insists on doubling down on the worst decisions that the show has made, I feel like I just have no other choice, because Bridgerton has been in a downfall for a bit, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. So before we drag the show, go click that subscribe button down there. Thank you very much, Pookies. And maybe let's start this review with some things that I actually liked. The one thing that I can consistently compliment Bridgerton on is the partners that Bridgerton siblings take on and how they shape the narrative. If you haven't noticed, every season of Bridgerton is somewhat tailored towards each of the siblings. The themes that the narrative hits feel close and in theme to each of the siblings, which is honestly the bare minimum and the bar is very low. But yeah, Benedict was always characterized as a bit of a dreamer, a bit of a fantasist, artsy and such. So it is of course perfect that his love story borrows from the fairy tale of Cinderella. So the basic breakdown of his love story so far is that he attends this masquerade ball hosted by his mother. He is shown to shun the wider society for its vapidness. Very original, I know. And you know, he's so deep and artsy, so it gives him pause when he sees this absolute cutie patootie in the crowd who is dressed in silver and is just so casually admiring the chandelier. This of course implies that she is not like the other girls and has appreciation for things others may not see the beauty in. Benedict then spends the evening with her outside on the terrace and they have a cute conversation. Benedict doesn't learn much about her since the lady refuses to tell him anything at all about herself. And then once midnight strikes, the lady leaves. Very Cinderella behavior, very dreamy, very in theme, amazing. Anyhow, then we get to see that behind that mask is a young woman named Sophie Beck, who works as a maid for her wicked stepmother and her two sisters. This becomes the basic setup for their love story. But the season, very much like the book that it is based on, plays with the Cinderella story in a nice way. You see, this season introduces a new angle to the show, which is the perspective of the maids and the servants that work in the Taunces' households. Honestly, very nice direction, makes sense, keeps things fresh, and shakes up the narrative. Very good. The one maybe a bit meh and superficial thing in this is that for at least the first half of the season, Benedict keeps regarding the lady in silver and Sophie Beck as two completely different people. He is on this little quest to find the lady, while some shenanigans also happen where he ends up spending a lot of time at my cottage with Sophie. Sophie eventually ends up employed at the Bridgerton house, so we get to see their romance develop, but of course, the show makes Benedict lose a ton of cognitive function and have him not recognize Sophie in any way at all. I mean, I guess it could make sense. The mask was rather big and not petite like other people's in the ball. It basically covered a ton of her face, but I feel like there was so much information he should have gleaned from that encounter to at least triangulate stuff. By episode 4, it feels like the show keeps throwing stuff directly into his face and he just weirdly doesn't think to connect any dots. Like literally, Sophie's general behavior is the exact same as ladies in silver. They talk the same, they have the same deep conversations. On top of that, Benedict managed to triangulate that it was none of the Taunces' ladies, which means it was someone who snuck in and might not even be of the same class as him. Even Sophie's bemusement and inability to dance at the ball are blatant clues to it. And then there is Sophie, who is just suspiciously knowledgeable at things way beyond her station, and Benedict does not put any of it together at any point, which is a bit annoying and does stretch believability, but we are talking about Bridgerton. So sure, it is unrealistic after a certain point, but I am willing to kick my feet and giggle for this particular choice if you catch my drift. The season so far uses very well the fact that Sophie is from a different social class, and the tension here is that Benedict cannot really do anything with Sophie since that would be frowned upon by high society. The show does acknowledge the implied power imbalance between Benedict and Sophie, even while they are spending time at my cottage and being all friendly and such, which is good. This is good stuff. I do feel like Sophie in general is very in theme for Benedict in particular, because you can see how they connect and how they clash in a way. They both appreciate the world around them in a similar way, but Sophie does feel like she can ground Benedict due to her upbringing and she is most likely more pragmatic, and Benedict can also elevate her and stimulate her in artsy and fun pursuits as such, to unground her if you will. Like, I can already see the wider picture between them and I am really liking it so far. I wasn't a fan of the previous couples too much, with the exception of Anthony and Katani because they were peak, but I am really digging Benophie and dare I say they might end up being my favorite. I mean, of course, the storyline so far leads to that very unsavory offer by Benedict for Sophie to become his mistress, but Bridgerton will find a way to navigate that, hopefully. So yeah, this time around I am really liking the romance stuff, which, if the show focused only on that, it would be excellent actually. But the sad reality is that this is a TV show. It has so much screen time and such an extensive cast that we end up getting pulled away from all of the good stuff, and instead we have to sit through less than stellar stuff on a regular basis. Because while we have the nice romance in the show, it is also full of frankly offensive shit that, while others may be, I am not horny enough to ignore. So a show like Bridgerton has one outstanding problem that is not really solvable when you think about it. It has to find a way to keep every character in the narrative in some way until their turn comes to take the central stage. If you weren't aware, there are 8 books in the Bridgerton series, and each of them focuses on a different Bridgerton sibling and their love story. Now, the books had the fortunate circumstance that they were, well, just words on the page, and had no actors, no sets, no locations attached, except for those in your head. So it had no obligation to do certain things that a show would. For instance, some of the stories took place in the same time frames, and books in general were able to focus on the main couple, which is natural. A TV show cannot do the lovely thing of just having 2 main stories taking place in tandem, since it's just not how that works. And they also choose to make the TV show more of an ensemble piece of the Bridgerton siblings and also just random assorted characters, which means that they have to constantly create various storylines to keep them in the show, but also busy, which is what I would like to call the Bridgerton Purgatory. And this purgatory results in a lot of whack stuff. The most notable example of this was actually Benedict. Last season he got a complete nothing burger of a storyline with Lady Tilly, and it was also just a bit of a shit storyline in general that didn't really have much of a purpose to it. Like, you can tell it's just there to give Benedict something to do before his own season. And let's step back and be pragmatic here. This is only going to get worse and worse and worse. I am already kind of scared to think about what sort of stuff they will be cooking up for Gregory and Hyacinth, considering that they are already there and having scenes and stuff to do while they wait for their turn. And Benedict is only one of these examples. In other instances, the show also tries to find ways to keep things around after they took their central stage. We have the gimmick of Lady Whistledown. The show really made its bed when it chose to focus so much on Lady Whistledown and make it such a huge part of the show's identity. The whole Gossip Girl but make it Regency era was fun for exactly 2 seasons, but beyond that it's becoming cringe. Maybe it was this way in the books as well. I haven't read them, but the show becomes wackier because it chooses to keep it around. In the 3rd season, we finally got to see the Dawn finding out that Penelope was bullying them all along in society papers, but that went down with the grandiosity of a kindergarten party. I understand that Bridgerton is far from any form of reality and hold no illusions towards that, but it is still unbelievably baffling how Penelope is still able to even walk the street without being jumped after dragging the Dawn for at least a few seasons. For a show that professes to care so much about rumor and gossip, the Dawn surely does not care about the damage that Pen has done through her rumor and gossip. So much so that not only does the show muster up yee-ass excuse for the Queen to allow Lady Whistledown to continue, everyone seemingly regards her as a celebrity. In season 4, Pen is suddenly this larger player in the society who has the ear of the Queen, while the Dawn has seemingly forgotten all the damage she has done. Again, I think the ship for realistic consequences has long sailed for Bridgerton, but Penelope just hanging around without any repercussions is hilariously dumb. The show just bends reality and makes random shit up to keep Lady Whistledown, but these instances, while annoying, are less offensive. There are 2 Bridgerton siblings in particular that suffer from this purgatory the most, albeit for different reasons. So let's just start with Eloise. You could maybe say that Eloise was always the most progressive out of her siblings. Ever since season 1, she has been talking smack about the Regency era society mores and the role of women in it. You may say it is a bit anachronistic considering the time period, but I do myself tend to believe that it is perfectly possible to hold more forward beliefs in a time where it's not likely. So you know, I kinda vibed with Eloise, as much as she was insufferable brat at times. So it would always be hilarious when they eventually would have to find a way for her to settle down with, apologies for the spoiler, Sir Philip Crane. So just to recap what she has been up to in the seasons before the 4th. In the 1st season she was just existing, I guess. Then in the 2nd season she was finding out who Lady Whistledown was. Then in the 3rd season she was beefing with Penelope while also having a friendship with Cressida Cowper. And honestly, those were fine developments so far. And then comes season 4. Season 4 sees Eloise come back from her time in Scotland. While she was there, she made a conveniently off-screen decision that she is now officially on the shelf, aka she will be a spinster and will not marry. Additionally, she apparently missed the society while she was away and she had no one to talk to, I guess. Which, I mean, I guess can kinda make sense, but Eloise always struck me as a person who would actually enjoy the time away rather than find things to miss about Mayfair. Anyhow, I have to admit that season 4 does show off some incoming growth for Eloise in ways that actually do make sense. There is, for instance, a conversation that Eloise happens to walk in on between Francesca and Penelope, where they are talking about sex and orgasm sarcasms. I thought this moment was rather nicely portrayed because Francesca and Penelope chose to not fill Eloise in on all the details, because their rationale is that it is married people stuff. So they create an environment where Eloise becomes the outsider in the conversation. And Eloise very specifically takes a note of that. There's also another moment where she chaperones Hyacinth's lesson and they go over seating positions in events. And Hyacinth remarks that Eloise would be seated differently than her married siblings. And Eloise once again takes note of that, which does make sense. Since Eloise is now so hell-bent on proclaiming herself to be a spinster, it makes sense that others are now viewing her as such and thus othering her. I cannot express enough how much that does make sense in this context and in their society, and that it is for sure a good idea to go with showing how much she would be othered by other people. I can see their rationale and where they are leading us to, because clearly Eloise is next to lead a season, but it still feels hella wrong in the context of the whole show, and that is for a few reasons. I feel like the show is being selective in the way they are showing off Eloise's situation. What we have seen so far is all of the disadvantages that spinsterhood would bring Eloise. By that society's logic, there are things she would never get to fully understand. She would be shunned away, since spinster status is not desirable and reflects upon the women in a negative way. At least that is what Bridgerton tells us. But on the same token, the season so far never really argues or grapples with the potential benefits of spinsterhood. You might argue that there are not many benefits to be had in Regency-era England, but this is literally Bridgerton, and a lot of historicity arguments in regards to titles and status become null simply because it's freaking Bridgerton. Bridgerton never dares to show the struggles of the couples post-marriage and post-happily ever after, never shows the incompatibility some couples might eventually face. Sure, there was one example of Lord Featherington being a flop, but none of the realness of a partnership exists within the close proximity of Eloise. I would throw in being child-free benefits in there too, but those become irrelevant when you're as rich as Bridgerton's. Bridgerton TV show has its own deeply rooted ideas about romance and love that I am not sure are compatible with the love story that we are about to see Eloise in. Simply put, I don't see Eloise becoming married not being some form of a tragedy for her character. Think about it. We are already seeing signs about how she feels shunned away, which I will only assume grow into her bending her own convictions and breaking into the mold at least in some way. While I hope this might happen, I simply do not see the season ending with Eloise undergoing these little frictions between her and her peers and coming to the conclusion that she is okay with it and is fine with the life of being on the shelf. It wouldn't be compatible with her incoming romance, and not even because of anything in the book content-wise. It's just that the notion of marriage itself that is so incompatible so far with Eloise. Heidi-ho, this is Editing Andrew here, standing in my closet with a phone in my hand, because apparently I cannot explain myself properly the first time around. So anyways, I want to point out that being married and her reaching her goals can be compatible with the right partner. Eloise also doesn't really seem that against marriage, but she does want to have agency in all of this, which does feel weird that she's now seemingly gonna cave due to social pressure and whatnot. I guess it's not unheard of, I guess it's kind of realistic, but I just hate it on a personal level and I really am manifesting that I am wrong about this. What I would like to see for her is her just being okay with being othered and not jump to marriage just because she feels lonely or something. I mean, it would be valid, it just seems too desperate for the character of Eloise we have so far, if that makes sense. Anyway, back to the video. And it pisses me off because Penelope, for instance, did a really scandalous thing that aimed at threatening the status of the people in the town, which is literally one of the most important things in their lives. She had the entire town in a stranglehold and was just allowed to continue to do so because the script wanted her to. To hell with historicity and these people's obsession with their status and social standing. Nobody gives a shit because now Penelope is a celeb. And then we have Eloise, who will potentially have to basically bend the knee to the same society at least at some point, because come on now, they are not skipping over her love story. Eloise coming to learn that she might indeed want to settle down and have kids with a man in a highly patriarchal society is indeed not the empowering move that the show thinks it is. I don't like how it will most likely treat her rebellion as a phase in some way at least. Her way of presenting it does need refinement, but I don't even believe that Eloise has ever really been wrong about any of it. Which makes me further frustrated because what else did the show expect to happen? This was such an obvious sticking point even back in season 1 that this type of scenario was always bound to happen. I don't trust Bridgerton of all shows to suddenly muster enough nuance to handle the baggage that comes with it, because the show views love with these rose-tinted glasses to such a stupid extent and nothing else matters. I additionally don't like what is happening with Eloise because the show is kind of validating Violet and all of this. Violet, being a good-intentioned mother that she is, has her own idea of what her children should do and is always there to try and gently push her kids into loving relationships, which is nice, and it is sweet to an extent. But I would have loved for the show to grow any type of principle for once and make Eloise not follow the path that Violet has for her. Like, are we being woke here, or are we not? you know? And then let's talk about Francesca and how season 4 shits all over her side of the plot. I was honestly in deep trenches during season 3 because I did not particularly like it. I liked the romance between Colin and Penelope. I didn't like the execution of it, or rather the lack thereof, because Bridgerton decided to make them the central love story yet barely focused on them, and it was felt. But in all of the useless slosh, there is the one and only thing that was the saving grace: Francesca. I love the fact that she, out of all of the young women in the marriage mart, was made the season's diamond. She wasn't being flashy, she wasn't being a tryhard, she was just being her cute and sweet reserved self, and that had a lot of charm on its own. Out of all of the Bridgerton siblings, Fran is the shy sibling that finds herself enjoying the quiet the most. It is an entirely different pace from the wider Bridgerton family, and the show really leaned into that. She meets John Sterling, the Lord Kilmartin, and both of them together become these shy cutie patooties that do not have this insane outwardly explosive love where they make out every chance they get and actively yearn for each other in every single moment that they are on the screen. Their love is quiet, yet still as powerful and valid, or so we are led to believe. One of the conflicts in that season was that Violet wasn't able to understand this type of love because she herself had this fairy tale romance with Lord Bridgerton. At some point she comments to Fran how she understands romance and says something along the lines of, "When you meet them you will stutter," or whatever the foreshadowing was. The show thought that they really ate with that one. Then we get Violet beginning to accept the love between John and Francesca, and honestly, how can you not? One of the most romantic gestures in the entire show comes from the interaction she has with John about a piece of music, and then she critiques it, and then John proceeds to listen to the critiques and rearranges the music in the way that she suggests and delivers her the music sheets. I was so downright bad for that. I was full on giggling, kicking my feet, twirling my hair, and biting my lip. Due to the sheer romantic aura that Fran and John had, I was completely sold. Immediately my favorite coupling. This is the one epic idea that the entire show has ever had. They really had something here with this. And then they proceeded to imply that Fran and I were wrong the entire season, because there is Francesca in the last 10 minutes of season 3 stuttering like a fucking idiot in front of John's cousin Michaela. In this context, I am not even mad at all that they changed the gender of the cousin. If they find an intelligent way of writing it, then I am fine with it, but it's freaking Bridgerton. And then season 4 doubles down on it in the most nasty way possible. It is basically rage baiting. So season 4 is probably the first season that has the time to focus on the moments after marriage in a realistic manner. In case of Francesca, her point of concern is conceiving a child and just sexual relations in general with her husband John. While sharing a single Regency era-coded brain cell, John and Fran come to the conclusion that Fran is struggling to be with child because she doesn't reach her pinnacle, which is their vernacular for orgasm. Fran goes on her little journey to find out what it is, and asks her mom and Penelope about it. And then she basically realizes that she has never reached it with John. She even goes as far as to fake it in front of him, which he immediately clocks. So basically, it is shown that Fran, according to Violet, does not love John, and neither can John satisfy her sexually. So John is just a completely wrong person for Fran to be with, which is such bullshit if you remember how it was set up in season 3. The whole gender flip with Michaela suggests that this is a sexuality issue rather than anything else, thus rendering Violet completely right in her assessment, that love is always this larger-than-life thing and Fran was wrong. And I would like to point out that there was a relatively easy fix to this that would eliminate all of the sour taste that the storyline leaves. Imagine if Violet, instead of implying that something wasn't right between Fran and John because their love wasn't explosive or some dumb shit like that, she thought it wasn't right because she actually knows her daughter very well. And by that I mean make Violet suspect that she has a different sexuality from her siblings on the virtue of being close with her children. The one thing that Violet is consistently shown to be is involved and know her children better than they know themselves sometimes. Maybe Violet has noticed how Fran never paid attention to men. Maybe she has noticed the attention Fran was paying to the members of her own gender. It wouldn't necessarily eliminate Fran being a bit of a mystery to her, but it would be consistent with her being in tune with her children, and it would also show care on behalf of Violet. Go ahead and make her an ally instead of giving her this weird and invalidating mother knows best moment that we get. This whole story so far between Fran and John just does not sit right with me, because it does feel like the show just doubles down on invalidating me and the rest of the audience for even daring to entertain the idea of a more quiet love. It also doesn't sit right with me because season 4 really deviates from the setup that Fran's book had in the book series. I believe the idea there was, and click away now or skip ahead because I will spoil things, the idea there was that John was her one true love and he sadly passes away, and Fran is supposed to somehow live past that and grapple with how she should approach her potential future love interest. This obviously won't be happening because Fran is clearly not interested in John to that extent, which is a freaking shame. It is also not happening because that storyline is giving to Violet this season, which you can make an argument serves a nice purpose because Violet is an older woman women. So second love and aging themes being interwoven provides something similar but not entirely the same to what Fran undergoes in her book. So the show wants to be woke, but I guess in a very bad way? Which is before we get to all the filler. Oh my god, the filler. So this season we are introduced to this new storyline for Lady Danbury. After resolving her beef with her brother last season, she now gets the urge to reconnect with her past, which is either setting up for her to leave the show or leave the show for a spin-off. I am indifferent to both of these options. But I began not caring too much for Lady Danbury. I like her in the context of Bridgertons and the society, but I am not particularly interested in anything beyond that, and the season is going beyond that, which just makes me disassociate if I'm being honest. Her and the Queen's banter is nice up to a certain point, and yeah, I did see Queen Charlotte and I enjoyed it a lot, but honestly, what is the point of it at this stage? I really just grew to dislike when Bridgerton proceeded to try and give some more substantive storylines to side characters, because usually they just detract from the main romance, and I just want to skip that. Like, yeah, the Queen character has insane aura, but how do I say this nicely? I don't really care for her. I don't really care about her or her friendship with Danbury that much when it exists outside of the main couple story. And then we also have the fucking Mondriches. And who cares about the fucking Mondriches? I do not know how to say this either, but they were cool for like a season or two, but I really have no interest in seeing them. I skip their scenes on rewatches, they feel like nothing. I have no investment in them. The season, I guess, tries to use Alice in this nice way when Lady Danbury sort of makes Alice become her own substitute for the Queen, which again, as long as it doesn't concern the main couple, I don't give a shit. I feel like Mondriches in particular just feel so disconnected from the rest of the TV show that they just live in their own little bubble, not doing much, but like, hey, they are there because it is a show with 8 episodes, I guess. I guess there is an argument in there that they are being built for a future storyline, which also might as well end up happening in this season. This is the one thing that is up in the air, and I would be more than happy to be humbled on that. All of that is to say, we got the first 4 episodes of season 4. We got the first taste and impressions, and I do not particularly like where this is going in the long term. Not even talking about the main storyline here. Benophie is honestly all great so far. I love them, except for that one offer that is yikes, but it is what it is. It was obviously coming if you know the books. But I don't really like what all of this means for the future storylines and continuity of the show. I don't like how the show just sets itself up in these shallowly progressive and woke ways and manages to just manufacture problems for itself in the process. As we like to say over here, Bridgerton just manages to trip on a flat road. There is a chance that the second part of the season proves me completely wrong and subverts all of my insights, but I am not really betting on that too much if I'm being honest. I feel like the show is telegraphing what it is doing pretty precisely. Like, I am not sure there's much of interpretation here, like they really set themselves up for something that is probably a shit shake. So, you know. Anyhow, I suppose we will meet at the end of the month to discuss part 2. And until that, I hope you have a lovely time. I hope you're having a lovely day. Also subscribe to my channel and don't forget to smile. Kidding. Bye bye.